Well, good morning again. I'm glad Mr. Peck talked about that speech in particular. It's has more power because partly it's improvised and Martin Luther King Jr. was already such a good preacher. He already had that speech background, so it was fairly easy for him to speak from the heart. Fun side note on that, the advisors who were writing the original speech with him, very annoyed that he changed it at first until they saw the impact. All right. So one thing I want to do that's a little bit different today is I'm going to start by talking about your junior meetings because I want to make sure that you know what's happening with those and so you can get to them on time. And of course, this only applies to the juniors, so you seniors can feel free to open up Schoology while I take a moment to do this. All right, so junior meetings are happening this week. For you hybrid folks, you're going to be meeting tomorrow. So that's why I want to talk to you about it today so you can check and see when your assigned meeting is. As you can see, I've put this one-page document in your week 3 folder or week 4 folder, pardon me. I also put it on your Schoology main page so you can find it easily. So as you can see, if you're a hybrid student, you click here to see when your meeting time is. So please do that at some point today so that you know tomorrow when your meeting is. As far as where your meeting is, you're going to be going to the media center. So head straight there. You don't have to come to the class. Head straight to the media center for your assigned time. You're going to need a device because you're going to be completing an online form. I would suggest bring a charged iPad. And if you're wondering, I should have started with what are we having meetings on? So the counseling department has these meetings every year to talk about the junior handbook and to help juniors plan for the last phases of their world here at FHS. In other words, helping to plan for your life beyond high school. So it is important you go. Now, for those of you who are watching that are distance learners, your meeting is today or tomorrow. Or not tomorrow. Tomorrow is not Thursday, girl. So distance learners, Monday and Thursday are your meetings. And to join those, you just click on the Google Meet. You get to decide if you're a distance learner, if you want to go to Monday's meeting at 10 a.m. or if you want to go to Thursday's meeting at 2 p.m. My guess is if you want more one-on-one time, go to the Monday one. All right. So I would also suggest before we move on to class here, set an alarm in your phone, set a reminder so that you remember your meeting. And of course, if you have any questions about that, I'll be in the GMeet, but I wanted to make sure that you knew about that. All right. So we're going to talk today about what you can expect. Going to go over the checklist and the schedules. Today, I'm going to teach you about how to best write your final draft, which many of you may remember from Speech 1. I'm also going to teach you how to best memorize it. So I'm going to talk about memorization versus familiarization. What I teach you today on memorization, I hope you can use in other classes as well. It's especially good for science classes like anatomy, and it's also good for government classes. So we'll get to that. Tomorrow, you can expect on day 2 that you are either working on performing your speech. So you're either asking Ms. Grundy, can I go out in the hall and film it? Or you're performing in class. As a matter of fact, if you're ready and you want to perform today, you could as well. So most of class tomorrow I have set aside for those folks who might want to perform in person or who need time to film it. All right, so filming your introduction speech. So as you can see on the checklist, same kind of deal. Things you're going to hand in this week include your final draft. You're going to answer a couple of prompts I'm practicing on the week 4 handout. So week 4 handout needs to get handed in with final draft. And if you're not performing in class, a video of your introduction speech, hand that in, please. And that goes right in the same folder as this week's work, so week 4. Here is the rubric and how I'm grading you. As you recall, your performance is being graded on, are you within the window of 1 to 3 minutes? Is your basic PV legs pretty good? And then second on the writing, have you included your name? Have you applied the strong 30 techniques we talked about last week? Is it written to appeal to the audience? Is it like a conversation rather than just listing facts? So those are the 2 main things I'm grading you on for the performance. Already did that. Got open office every day this week, so if you need some help, have a look at the schedule and click on the link. Tomorrow, I'm going to be telling you a CTA, and here's the updated votes. Tomorrow, I'll tell you a CTA at the beginning of class, and I'm going to tell you names, which is a new one I haven't done, so we'll see how it goes. If that's not your jam, you are welcome at the beginning of the class tomorrow to open up Schoology and get started. Not a problem. All right, so at this point, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about how to write your final draft, give you some performing tips, and then, like I said, teaching you how to memorize. And we got Mr. Benedict Cumberbatch on our image here because he was in a show called Sherlock. You may have seen it. And the memory technique I'm going to teach you today was featured on that show quite a few times. All right, so first off, how to best make a final draft. It really helps to practice your rough draft first so that you know you have the timing down and to see if all the phrasings work when you say them. Then, to make the final draft, make it short word bullet point style. And I would suggest writing it big. The goal for a final draft is to have just enough so that when you glance down at it, you remember what you were going to say. That's what you want. So don't write it word for word. Otherwise, the temptation is to read it. You can also use Post-its if that works for you. Sometimes when I film things, I'll put a Post-it right in my line of sight here with the camera. So it still looks like I'm making eye contact with you, but I'm checking my notes. Others have told me that that technique doesn't work for them. It just looks on camera like they're constantly looking over. You got to make your final draft work for you. I got some students who like it digital, who like to make a short draft thing they can put on their phone and just have it there. Others of us swear by note cards. If you use note cards, make sure to number them, because our tendency is to shuffle them when we get nervous or when we're thinking. So for example, this is my Sp2 note card for today, and it just has real briefly what I'm doing, including the day on it. And then the back, I put day 2. Note cards, in my opinion, work really well because if you write them with pencil especially, it's really easy if you're up at the podium and you think of something to add, you just quick add it. Or if you notice, oh, there's a kid in the back who can't really hear me, I can write louder on my note card. So the next time I use it, I have it. So if these are full of little notes for you, that's absolutely fine. You don't get marked down. Here's an example for the speech, the introduction speech I performed for you, and that's on YouTube if you want to see it. So there's just some short word numbered note cards. Absolutely, you can use regular paper if you don't have note cards. I'm not docking you for that. How silly. If you don't have note cards, but you'd like some, there are plenty in the room on top of that white bookcase. Feel free, have at them. All right. You also have to decide this week, am I going to perform in class or film? So I'm going to go over some pros and cons with some tips. So if you're in class, the con is you have to deal with nerves and possible interruptions. It happens, that's life. Interruption thing also can happen with filmed though. The pro of in class is once you performed it, you don't have to see it again. It's done. Couple tips if you're going to perform in class. Use your phone as a timer. These things are amazing. Okay? I would use the stopwatch function. And if you don't know how to get to that, click on your clock. Then it'll show you all the options for your alarms and stopwatches and what have you. I would suggest as well, before you even start speaking, and this goes for in class or filmed, set yourself up. So make sure you're in a comfortable position. You got yourself angled the way you want to. You have your final draft where you want. So you have your phone. I would also suggest before you start, just do a quick throat clear. So that way it doesn't crack when you first speak or sound kind of garbled. I don't start timing you until you start speaking. So take your time. Filmed, on the other hand, the pro of that, you watch the video and you can refilm and re-edit. So if something goes wrong, you can have just the parts that worked. I have so many students who will hand in a speech that has different clips for different parts of it, and that's absolutely fine. I don't worry about a little bit of transition in between clips. So that's the pro of filming. You can refilm things if it doesn't work. That's also kind of a con, because if you're a bit of a perfectionist like myself, filming is kind of a nightmare. Things go wrong and you got to learn to just flow with it. Reminder, your grade will not be docked if you have a pet that wanders in, or a sibling, or if you grew up in a family like mine, your ma starts hollering, that's fine. You're not going to get graded down for that. I would just edit around it if you can. The con of filming, people often don't like how they look and sound on camera. Even those of us who do this for a living, this whole camera business is an adjustment. The main way I do it is when I look at the camera, I picture your faces. So I imagine I'm looking at your face and it makes it easier. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking to myself. You may have that if you film. That's very normal. Now, when you film, you can be in a comfortable position, meaning you don't have to stand if you don't want to. You can be seated, but make sure you have good posture, not like rigid, like I am going to go start a Prussian franchise, but poised. You want to be straight up. You want to have everything set up for you. You also want to film your shot, so I get at least the top half of your body. So I can see your eye contact, I can see your poise, and I can see your gestures. All right, so this is about how do I actually practice the thing. For this first speech, I do not have a formal practice handout for you. What I have is, and I'll show you this in a moment, actually, let's just show it now. Just show it now, lady. All right, so let's show you where you're gonna write this stuff. So that's final draft is task 1. For practice, as I'm talking here, I want you to think of either 2 of the tips I gave that seem best, or what you tried out and what works, that kind of thing. So it's really reflecting on practice, what you think about it. I am not going to make you film a practice, nor am I going to make you fill out a handout on who you practice with for this first one. It's an intro speech. You're introducing you, so less formal practice is okay. It's really up to the person. All right, so let's go back to practice tips. So one tip I have for you, and this goes for anything in speech, is visualize. So picture things going well, even if you think they might not. It's kind of a matter of tricking your brain. So imagine that when you're performing to a really receptive audience, that they just love it. And the good news is you are performing to a receptive audience. I do love watching your speeches. So imagine, if it helps, imagine when you practice me watching the speech and really enjoying it. All right. The goal is to present closer to a conversation rather than reading word for word. So the more you can get off script, the better. The other practice tip I have for you is something that some of you athletes and actors already know: muscle memory. So the more you practice a skill, and including with visualization, the more you practice a skill, the more it becomes automatic in the brain and in the body. I'm not entirely sure how all that works, to be honest with you. I just know it does. So the more you practice full on, meaning with the gestures, the eye contact, everything, the better it will go when you perform it. Now, as far as whether or not you have to know every word, here are your options for practicing. You can either familiarize, which means you know the main beats, and it's okay if you forget some of the details, or you can memorize. Memorize is more of an option for those of you who really like your phrasing. Memorizing is more challenging than familiarizing because it counts on word order. In other words, if you say something first when you're memorizing, you always have to say that first part to remember the second part. So your brain works on chronological clues, essentially, and that can make memorization tricky. So I'm going to teach you a technique today to help with that. Final practice tip is use tools. Like I mentioned before, the stopwatch timer function on your phone. I film my practices or I rewatch some of my classes to see what things are working and what things are not. For example, in watching some of my classes, I noticed I started many of them with this long clearing of the throat. I can only imagine what that was like for the live audience. Like, oh, okay, well, glad you got phlegm. Another thing I would suggest for using tools is anxiety or calming apps. There's quite a few of them that you can get and put them right on your phone that will like give you a 1 minute like deep breathing exercise or a 1 minute calming exercise. These are very helpful, not just for speech, but life. So I would suggest those things. All right, so I want to tell you about a memory technique that you may have heard of before because it's ancient, literally. This has been around since Roman times, if I recall correctly. So this is called the memory palace. You will also see it referred to as the mind palace or the memory castle. Same deal. So how this basically works is in your mind, you assign your main ideas that you have to memorize to a place you know well, or you visualize them in a place where you have to recall the ideas, like the classroom. I used to do this in my physics class and my biology class in high school because I had a hard time remembering all the things I had to remember for science. This is how you do it. So I would start with either picturing the classroom or your house because you know your house really well. So for example, if I was going to do memory castle in my apartment, I would start at the door and then I would look in the kitchen and in my mind, so this is all in your mind, by the way, you don't have to walk around your house going like this. So in my mind, I picture the first thing I have to remember. Let's say it's parts of a paragraph. So I could go kitchen, topic, sentence. And I would picture for me what a topic sentence looks like or a visual that'll help me remember it. I do this for each room in my house and for each, well, my apartment, and for each step that I have to remember. So if the second thing I want to remember for paragraph is first body sentence, I could go into the living room here and picture first body sentence. For your introduction speech, you could do this with the classroom. So imagine walking in, you visualize, or actually if you're performing it, it's better to visualize up from the podium. So if you perform in class, I can visualize from the podium, the side with the flag. I picture my introduction where I want to talk about my name story. So I picture my dad going, let's name her Monica. And my mom going, yeah, at first, that sort of thing. So one thing that's really important for Memory Palace is the sequence. It's really important you have ideas in a sequence. Here's a visual of that. And I've also included in your optional resources some videos to help you see how this looks. So that's one thing to try. And I would really recommend it for anatomy and other classes where you have to remember a lot of information. It helps your brain. It gives your brain something to connect to. All right, I've also included on your optional resources some backup links, some extra info. So how to practice, some vocal warm-ups you can try, and then just a reminder of PV legs, elements of body language, how to use them. All right, so let's go back to the beginning here. So at this point, you folks are going to write your final draft and then work on your practice. So let me show you how that's going to look, what options you have. I also want to go over how you're going to be graded today, or this week, I should say. So 5 points of your grade this week is formative. As you recall, that's the 40% of your grade. And that's going to be on writing your final draft and then completing those prompts to show your thinking and learning. As far as the final draft goes, you can either write it in your short word format, that part's key. So you can either write it in short word format on this template I've included, or if you wish to use note cards or a piece of paper, take a picture of it and paste it right here. You can also submit it separately in week 4 if that's easier for you. So that's today's work. And then when you perform the speech, either in class or filmed, here's how I'll grade you. And this grade is summative. So the 60% of your grade, kind of like a quiz in another class. So first on the pacing and the performance, like I talked about, 5 points for that, and then 5 for your content. So this week you're going to hand in this handout, final draft, and then a video of your performance if you don't perform in class into the week 4 Schoology assignment handout. All right, so that's the work ahead of you. If you want to perform today or tomorrow, please let myself or Ms. Grundy know. And as always, if you have questions, please join me in the Meet, or you can send me a message and I'll quick fire off a response. You got this. Go for it.